สำหรับช่วงถัดไปจะเป็นการบรรยายในหัวข้อ Adaptive Security Architecture โดย Mr. Ssu-han Koh Sales Engineer Manager Southeast Asia McAfee ขอเชิญท่านขึ้นบนเวทีค่ะ Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Ssu-han Koh.
Hi everyone, thanks for your time. And I know I'm the second last presenter for today. So hopefully you all have time and not fall asleep. And pardon my Thai language is not so good, so I'll be speaking in English. And hopefully you can catch up along the way. So today my topic that I'm going to talk about is an adaptive security architecture. Just prior to starting on the topic, I just want to spend a minute or so to just share with you about McAfee. And the reason why I want to touch on this is because we had undergone a few changes. And as of April this year, we became a standalone entity. So we're a private company owned by TPG majority owner. Intel still owns 49% of us, but we are a standalone entity. And what this means is our CEO, Chris Young, who has been with us for the last 3 years, continues to lead us. The strategy, the direction, the product roadmaps continue as it is. And so from a customer, our customers, there is no changes that you will see. The strategy, the roadmap that we embark on continues as it is, and you'll see us developing more and more technologies as we go along. As part of this topic, I wanted to use the chance to actually share an analysis of what I see in the market, what has been happening, some of the learnings that we have done, and what does it mean to you. All right? So as a start, we talk about trust. Now, trust is something that has been happening in the security world for quite a while. If you look at where trust is trust really a benefit to the attackers, the adversaries, or to security practitioners like you and me? And if you look at what has been happening over the last couple of years, trust has reached to a point where the adversaries are actually innovating. They are sharing information among one another. They are building, they are evolving, and such that the threats are a lot more advanced. The threats are a lot more nimble. There are a lot more threats now today than ever. We see a couple of thousand malwares, new malwares that we identify every day. Time has been an imperative where we talk about time. Is it really on the attacker side, the adversary side, or on our side? And if you look at where time is, if you think of a few years ago where the attackers released generic malware, or in the last couple of years we talk about advanced malware, targeted attacks, and so on. There was still a time where if an attacker gets onto the network, that they do take time to understand your network before they can actually start to look at data exfiltration. Fast forward to today, in the last year or so, we see malwares like ransomware, where time is really not on our side anymore. The moment a machine is hit or infected by a ransomware, business stops. And a good example is early this year about WannaCry, Petya, and so on. Good examples of ransomware where it becomes very time critical. So the question is time on our side, or is time more on the adversary side? Yeah. The other thing about time is interesting is there was a survey done by Aberdeen Group, and the survey talked about the time versus the business impact. So what the survey found was this, that if we manage to reduce the detection and response time of an attack or incident in our environment by 50%, if we reduce that time by 50%, the impact, the risk to the business is reduced by 70%. And so there's a huge advantage of where we can and what we need to do looking at the time and how we manage our security of our businesses. So let's start a bit about today's landscape, what I see and what we feel. I've talked this to many customers and many business owners, and what we feel is that at this point of time, we feel that there's a bit of advantage to the adversaries. We are in this perfect storm of where many things are happening, and these are some of the top areas. One, digital transformation. There's a lot of changes going on in our current world. You look at the IoT, you look at moving to cloud, whether it's for business moving to cloud. You look at the platform support that we have to handle and secure all these devices. We look at the labor, the people, the security practitioners. There's a tight crunch. And if you look at some of the surveys, one of the survey by ISC Square talked about the prediction that by 2020, there's going to be a shortage of security practitioners of about 2 million people, right? And what does this mean to us in terms of security practitioners to manage our security in our organization, to secure organization, to understand the threat landscape, to operate our systems and security technologies in our environment, and to better protect it. Regulatory burdens, budgets. There could be more budgets, and we are seeing that there's increase in budgets. Is it enough? Is it spent in the right areas? Time. I talked about time earlier, and obviously the threats has gone up. It's gone up in terms of quantity, it's gone up in terms of the malicious or the advancedness of the threats. So we are in this perfect storm where we see that there's a lot more things that's happening, and it's getting a lot tougher for us as security practitioners. Speed of innovation has happened, right? We see that as part of speed of innovation, there's a lot more devices, there's a lot more connected devices on the network, more devices that we connect to our offices, more network traffic, more data generated, right? Innovation happens not only because it helps us to create efficiencies, build more businesses, more profitability for our business, but there's also innovation in terms of the type of attacks. We've seen attacks that go down lower levels to be more advanced at the master boot record, UEFI and BIOS. We've seen files that in the last year, we see fileless attacks that's happening, right? And so the advancements of these attacks are also innovating, right? The attackers are innovating. And when we look at that, we say, well, do we look at more technologies to be incorporated into our businesses to protect our business? What kind of technologies do we need to include? But the reality is, as we do more of this and we start adding more technologies in, the other side of the coin or the output is that we could have a lot more alerts, a lot more events. And if you look at that, what you see is this, a survey that McAfee did last year. We actually interviewed security practitioners, organizations to say, among all the events that you receive, are you able to investigate all the relevant alerts? And basically, 93% said they can't. So I'm not sure whether this is similar in your organizations, but general feel is there's so many events now with more technology, we are not able to stay on top of all the alerts and relevant threats that we are seeing. And what's even more difficult is, as we ask another question, so if you have not investigated all, those alerts that you did not investigate, do you think you were impacted by those events? And 78% said yes. Those events that they could not investigate, they felt that they were impacted by it. Majority were low, but some were on moderate or even high severity or impact to their businesses, right? So what have we learned? The couple of things that we are learning, and we're trying to see what we can do. And one of the examples that I want to share with you here is on the shadow brokers, right? One of the things we learned early this year was cyber hygiene is still important, that we still need to do our vulnerability scans, our Windows patches, our patch updates. We need to segment the security of our network to potentially limit issues or spread of malware. What the survey came up with by Verizon Data Breach Report was that, on average, businesses takes about 12 weeks to fully roll out their patches. Well, 12 weeks is about 3 months. Seems pretty reasonable from the operations viewpoint. But what's interesting in this report or in this information is this. If you look at where WannaCry as an example, right? Microsoft released the patch in March. 9 weeks later, WannaCry came out. So it took 9 weeks for attackers to come up with WannaCry ransomware, but it takes 12 weeks for operations team to actually roll out the patches. What does this mean? We are exposed. The time that it takes for us to operate and protect our environment is not where we think it should be. Fast forward to the attackers, the adversaries. They are innovating, right? It's not like they are going to stand still. They are similar to you and me. They are people. We are thinking of ways to try to make things better, faster. As we research, as we invest in our business to grow, they are also looking at ways to how to move things more efficiently. From their viewpoint, they're saying, how can I make my malware or my attacks more successful, have a higher hit rate? That's what they're looking for. And if you look at where some of it has come and has happened, is things like ransomware as a service, right? Or I think attack campaigns as a service, or sharing their APIs, ransomware, Trojans, attacks as a service to spread out, to make it faster, and to release more strains and more different type of attacks. And so if you look at where we are, the attackers can really move things very fast. They could just modify a bit of the code of the attacks, release a new version of the malware, and use it. The next day, if this doesn't really work, they'll try another tweak of the malware, release a new sample. They can be that nimble. But if you think of an organization like us, what does it take for us to roll out a new technology if a new attack was discovered? Well, we technically have to say, well, let's look at what technology there are in the market. Is the technology mature to be used in a large enterprise like us? Well, if that's the case, then let's look at evaluating a technology, getting budget, running a tender, evaluating a products that's available. And then once you acquire it, it takes another 6 months or a year to roll out the technology effectively in my organization. So it takes anywhere between 6 months, a year or more to roll out a technology. Attackers could take days, weeks, rolling out a new attack. And so if you look at where we are, it's not a very balanced, we're not fighting on the balanced field. We are a bit on the back foot, where attackers can be a lot more nimble. And we as security practitioners, on the good side, we are trying to protect our environments, our businesses, but we are not as nimble as them. So something has to change. We did a survey as well. It's a global survey, and I just took out the ASEAN portion that's more relevant to us. And the survey is more about if you had more investment dollars for security, where would you prioritize the money to be spent on which areas of security in your organization? Now, if I look at people, 30% more training is being invested. The number 30, the numbers in red are actually what is in Southeast Asia. The numbers in gray, 25%, is what is the global average. And if you see where we are spending a bit more in training than the global average, which is good because I think there's a skill set shortage that we have, and we need to train, and we need to get our guys to be more familiar with security, the products that we use, the threat landscape, and how do we defend. As we look through the process and the technology, we start to see a bit more differences. If I go to the technology side, 45% are looking at investment into protection technologies. Now, protection technology is something that we have been doing for many years, right? We've invested in protection technologies like antivirus, firewalls, IPSs, but yet we still see that there are more and more breaches that are happening. Every other day you see and hear about breaches that is announced. And the strategy has changed for a lot of customers where we talk about strategy of if we get compromised, what do we do? versus when we get compromised. The difference is if is I'm assuming I will not get compromised and I'll protect as much as I can so that I will not get compromised. Reality is that the strategy today, a lot of customers are shifting towards a strategy of when. Assuming that I get compromised and when I get compromised, do I have the necessary technology to be able to detect what's happening in my network and respond? Do I have a plan? Do I have a, oops, this dropped out. Do I have a plan to how we can actually respond to that challenge? And so that strategy has changed, but if you look at where the spend is, it's still very much more on protection technologies. We're spending 45% of investment on protection rather than 33%, which is at global average. If we look at processes where the global versus ASEAN, 28% of the investment is going to be in improved collaboration to enhance preparedness for the advanced security threats versus global average of 32%. And we're spending 20% versus 28% to try to automate it. Now, what does this say? Based on my analysis is that what globally organizations are trying to do is to spend on ways on automating and trying to reduce the load. So if you go back to the perfect storm situation, right? Time is not really on our side. Go back to the situation where there's not enough security practitioners. Budget is always a constraint. Even if we increase it, it's not unlimited. There's something we need to work within the budget. The only way that we see things that we can actually handle going forward for the next couple of years is how do we take off some of the manual processes that we have? Can we automate some of the stuff that we've been doing manually for a long time? If we can automate that, wouldn't that be much better that I can allow the security staff to be able to focus on the areas that are important, to be able to build more, spend more time in investigating and uncovering incidents or issues in my environment, rather than doing the menial task of running reports, looking at alerts, generating events, and so on. So that's another learning that we have in terms of this report. If we look at how we want to move forward with the challenges that we have and the attacks that we see, we want to see how we can actually secure and solve tomorrow's challenges in security. Some of it, talk about the asymmetry in information. The attackers have a bit of an advantage over us. We're trying to make attacks more expensive, that the attackers say, well, maybe I won't target this company because they're more secure. It's easier to target another company, and so on and so forth. But what I'd like to share with you is a curve that we call Graumans Curve. Now, Graumans Curve is something that I think if you hear it and you see it, it makes a lot of sense. Think of it this way. Over the years, we have put in more and more technologies to secure our environment. We had firewalls in the 80s and AV in the 80s, firewalls in the 90s. We started to put IDSs and IPS in the early 2000s and so on. And we're starting more and more technologies into our environment. But we're still seeing a lot of attacks. Now, Graumans Curve is something that I think if you hear it and you see it, it makes a lot of sense. Think of it this way. Over the years, we have put in more and more technologies to secure our environment. We had firewalls in the 80s and AV in the 80s, firewalls in the 90s. We started to put IDSs and IPS in the early 2000s and so on. And we're starting more and more technologies into our environment. But we're still seeing a lot of attacks. And if you see what's happening is that there's a new way of attack, and so the current technology may not be able to suit the need and can't solve the current problems. So someone develops a new technology, right? Take an example, 3-4 years ago, sandboxing was a technology that grew up. There was a need to uncover targeted attacks because there were more targeted attacks going on. How do I test an unknown malware or unknown file and see is it malicious or not? How do I do it at scale? How can I do it fast? And then sandbox technology came about. So if you look at this, what we call a technology adoption curve as well, is that when a technology is created because there's a gap and there's a need. This technology, when it's first created, has a very high efficacy of detection of unknown attacks. And over time, as the technology evolves, as you shift the curve, the blue curve towards the right, efficacy goes up, and as it matures, more companies adopt the technology, right? And so on, as it reaches a point where if it becomes more widely adopted, the attackers, they're also learning, they're also innovating. What do? They innovate the malware to have evasion techniques. So if you have a sandbox that was very high efficacy to protect, the malware authors will say, well, let me try to do some evasion techniques. If I'm in a virtualized environment, I don't release my payload. If I'm in a virtualized environment that's only one core instead of 2 cores, which most laptops have today, don't release my payload. And the sandbox may miss it. Yeah? So efficacy drops, and then the product vendor will try to enhance the capabilities to include anti-evasion techniques inside, and then the efficacy goes up again. And this is cat and mouse game that continues, right? And if you look at where it is as an organization, if we invest in a technology, we will always want to make sure the efficacy is high. Extend the efficacy, shift the curve to the right. Where you see the dotted red line, if I can shift the curve to the right, I can improve the efficacy, I can better protect my environment, and improve the ROI, right? If I were to ask you the question, if there's a new technology, where would you be in terms of adopting it? Where's the best point on the curve to adopt the technology? And you would want it to be somewhere high on efficacy. At that point, it's probably widely adopted. So you get a lot more value of it. But you could be reaching the tail end, where because it's more widely adopted, attackers are building evasion techniques into the technology. And so by the time you acquire a technology, which takes time, the attackers will start to use evasion techniques to try to reduce the efficacy. How many times I've talked to our customers that says, well, you know, we have deployed new technologies, evaluated is very good. But after deploying a year or two later, seems like doesn't really protect me very well. And realistically, in security, you would want to be able to deploy technology very fast to hit at that point of efficacy that's high and extend it over to the right to continue the efficacy, continue the value that you've invested in. So my subsequent slides we're going to talk about is really about how do we help you, or something to think about in terms of architecture, improving the efficacy by making the curve shift to the right of the existing technology. And secondly, how do I adopt technology fast? If I can adopt it fast, the value to my organization of protection or detection is much higher. So that's going to be the scenario of my subsequent few slides that I'm going to talk about. Prior to that, I just want to share with you a bit of a survey as well that we have done last year. And the question was really, as a customer or as a business owner, are you looking at best of breed technology or are you looking at integrated platform? The result was interesting because more than half of the customers, the businesses that we interviewed, said that they wanted an integrated platform. It's interesting because if I were to ask this question 3-4 years ago, I'm very sure the result would have been very different. I guess most of you will also agree with me that most organizations, if I were to ask you this question 3-4 years ago, you would say that I would want a best of breed technology. Yeah? But it has reached a tipping point where more than half of the respondents said they wanted an integrated platform. For the challenges I talk about, how do I process more events, more alerts? How do I defend against the evolution and the changes that is happening? The attack surface has gone up. The changes in the IT world has gone a lot. How do I continue to protect my environment better? And so now a lot of customers are actually looking at a platform approach more than the best of breed. Reason why is that they have seen it. Added new technology, the enemy is really ourselves. By having a wide technology sprawl in our environment, right? The challenges we face is because there's so many technology, it's harder to get it implemented properly in my environment. With that, I need to train my staff to be able to use it better. And I may need to do some customization, some integration to make it more efficient and more effective. And those really are our challenges today, right? It becomes a lot more complex, more technology, more time to manage and maintain all these systems. And if you look at the way of the integration, we also ask the question, so if you have a solution and you needed to integrate, or you don't need to integrate, what would be your preference? And the top requirements and the top feedback was that we wanted a solution to integrate with DLP, or endpoint, or SIM. Or they may say, I wanted a solution that allows me to outsource to a managed service security provider to help me manage the events, right? Or build in-house SIM capability and outsource the monitoring to a vendor who has the expertise and skill sets in it. But if you look at this survey, what it means is that customers, businesses are asking not for just best of breed, but an integrated architecture to be able to use it more effectively and efficiently. So that lays the foundation of what I'm going to talk about. What we are seeing and what I would challenge you is to how would you design your environment from a security perspective to build an integrated system in your environment. Integrated system will give you ability to adopt technology faster, all right? Because it's integrated, you can do some testing and figure out whether it suits your environment, but then the solution, the outcome is what you can achieve in a much faster manner. Something to think about as well, automation. With so much tasks, jobs at hand, what are some of the things that we can do to really automate and take the load off the security practitioners' environment? If there are 1,000 events a day, how many events can your SOC team monitor or investigate in a single day? What if we can automate some of these processes that we have been doing day to day? And the last point is really about an open ecosystem. Why open ecosystem? We recognize that there's no single security vendor that will give you end-to-end security for your needs. It's going to be multiple vendors, 3, 5, 10, 15. But what you need is really an ecosystem that allows you to say, if I got vendor A technology and vendor B technology, can they communicate with one another, share the intelligence, make each other smarter, and create efficiencies in my environment? Give you an example. If today we had a sandbox technology that uncovers a new unknown malware, and you take the IOC from it, the IP address, the file hash, and say, now that I got this info, I want to use it to better detect and protect my environment. How many people do you need to deploy to pervasively detect and protect your whole environment, right? Across the whole organization, from your firewalls to your IPSs, to your web, email, to your endpoints, all your endpoints. Imagine you have a distributed environment, many branches. How many people, how much headcount do you need to actually deploy out to tackle that one threat? How long does it take? Some customers I talked to, they said, well, to detect, to just uncover, takes me a few days, or a few hours, or even a week. Some customers say that, well, for me to implement this requires 3/4 of my security staff to implement because of the pervasive environment that I have, many branches. And it takes anywhere between a week to 2 weeks before I actually deploy out all the IOCs that I have. What if the challenge is this? If we can do it within a minute or two, would that be a game changer for you to be able to detect and uncover and implement the controls pervasively across in your environment? And it's not impossible. It's just to think of what it looks like, how you envision your environment to be, and then how do we achieve that in the next couple of years? Because it's not going to be overnight that you can achieve this. It takes time. But is that a vision that you are looking forward to? And how do we go about achieving that? So this is where we think the adaptive security architecture is important, that it needs to satisfy these three pillars and really to be able to give you an advantage of working together. Remember the attackers, we talk about how fast, how nimble they are, and how slow we could be because of the way we work. If we have architecture like this, we can now respond in a matter of minutes what used to take days, weeks to implement, and how fast that will actually protect my environment. One of the visions that we have is how do we create a platform approach that allows isolated technology to talk to one another, to share intelligence, to allow you to automate some of the processes. And what we look at is from a vendor perspective to multiple vendor perspective to your own custom apps and your custom developments that you may have. And what we want to build is really a platform, an open platform that allows integration and customization. So one of the things that McAfee did over the last 3-4 years was to build this open platform called Data Exchange Layer. And we made it open standard that allows other vendors, other partners, SIs, customers like yourself, to really customize use cases that you think can value add to your business. Every business may be slightly different, and you may think of a particular need or use case that you have that we may not provide out of the box. And that's something that this platform allows you to be a lot more nimble, to be able to detect and protect your environment much better. As part of the adaptive security architecture, I think it's important to also think about an outcome that you would like for your business from a security angle. We've always talked to customers where the discussion is about, I already have this technology, and I'm missing one technology piece to plug in and to protect my environment better. I always challenge my customers to challenge me back to say, ignoring the technology piece, ignoring the constraints as a starting point, what's the outcome you like to achieve? Give you an example. If today, as I was saying, an unknown piece of malware that comes in, or an unknown piece of malware that was recently discovered in the news, the first question the bosses may ask is, am I impacted? How long does it take for you to uncover, to provide the information back to the CISOs, and so on? Is it hours, days, weeks? How many people have to scramble just to get the information? And that's on top of all the work that you're already busy with. So the challenge is this: how long does it take you to do that currently, uncover that threat that's in your, whether it's in your environment and whether it's impacting you? And what would be the ideal response that you would think you would want? Do you want to be able to say, I want to give this answer to my CISO or to my bosses within the next hour or 2 hours? Is that the benchmark that you're setting? Now, if that's the benchmark you're setting, what do I need to do to get to that level? And it's achievable because we have customers we have worked with to be able to deliver some of these challenges, outcomes that we talk about, to help customers to achieve that level. And if you go back to the adversaries versus us, how nimble they are, this really will be a game changer of how we actually how we are able to design our architecture in our environment and be a lot more nimbler than what we are today. So I always advise customers, don't think about the product and technology first. Think of the outcomes that you want to achieve. If you look at optimizing security operations, how fast does it take for you to turn an alert, to investigate, to validate it, to determine the pervasiveness of the attack, and to contain it, or even to clean it up? How fast would you like it to be? Would you need it to maybe outsource to a service provider to manage the events, inform you, and have some integrated architecture that allows you to move faster? How fast would that be? So these are some of the thoughts that you need to be thinking about beyond just the technology discussion. And hopefully with this, we can actually work towards a much better architecture going forward that allows us to protect ourselves better, but also change the game against the attackers, how nimble we can be in protecting our business. So what we have done is, we have actually gone to some of our customers where we actually designed the architecture and we asked for the feedback. And implementation and so on, when we went back, we asked what are some of the attributes of it. And we found that with an architecture approach, there's a way to say, well, they were able to reduce the technology sprawl by 62%. They're able to reduce manual efforts by 70%. They were able to increase handling capacity of events and incidents 1,000%. This is just a specific example of customer that we have done that really helped them to improve their efficiencies. And if you think of where this is and what the challenges we have, this would really help organizations to be a lot more nimble and to be able to protect your business better. So this is what we talk about in terms of adaptive security architecture that really helps you to protect your business. And so if I were to summarize, right, adaptive security architecture, what it looks like, we need an integrated platform, something that provides ability to talk to one another, to expand the efficacy, extend it further over time, able for you to adopt technologies faster because there's already integration done, conflicts are reduced because there's not much overlap. Automation. With a lot of things that we're putting on network today, we really have to look at how we automate some of the stuff that we have been doing manually. Right? With the restrictions on security practitioners, budgets, the time, we really need to look at possible ways of automating. And lastly, an open ecosystem approach, which allows you to integrate different technologies, different vendors' products, build use cases around to help you solve the challenges that you face. Right? So with that, thank you for your time. Hopefully it's been insightful. And have a good last couple of hours in this session. Thank you very much.